Welcome to the JOMA Preventative Health Podcast, hosted by the Jewish Orthodox Women's Medical Association. We provide you with up-to-date information on health topics geared towards the Orthodox Jewish community. This podcast content is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice or as a substitute for the medical advice of a physician.
Welcome to the Jewish Orthodox Women's Medical Association, or JOMA podcast. I'm your host, Elisa Minkin. I'm a general pediatrician and proud JOMA member. And today I'm really honored and really excited to be interviewing Esther Rochel Gertner. Again, if you have a topic you want to hear, you want to be interviewed, you know someone you want me to interview, you have comments on the podcast, please reach out to us at health, HEALTH, at joma.org. We want to hear from you. In fact, Esther Rochel Gertner reached out to me. I like to tell people these things because I get so excited. I love hearing from people. And she's a big fan of mine in the UK. And I started talking to her and said, I have to interview her. So Esther Rochel Gertner combines her background in psychology and special education along with her life experience as a parent to empower parents and teachers to successfully advocate for their child's needs whilst providing a safe and nurturing environment. She's an educational consultant with a master's in psychology and has over 25 years of experience working with both the students directly and the team around the child. She is passionate about helping families and educators tap into the strengths and delights of each individual by integrating educational, social, and emotional functioning to help the whole child. So again, Esther Rochel Gertner works in the UK British system. It's very different from those of most of our listeners who are from the US, although we do have people from all over the world. I'm very excited about that. So we made this very general. I'm going to try to go into more detail with the pediatric neurologist, most likely, on more details of how to work within the American special education system. But I really adore Esther Rochel. Advocacy is the center of what I'm passionate about, and it's the center of what she's passionate about. So we are on the same page, and I really had a great time talking to her, and I think you will enjoy listening. Welcome, Esther Rochel. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Absolute honor. You know, I'm your fan.
I love it. I love that you wrote to me. I always say, please, reach out to me. I'm lonely. No, I love to hear from people because it helps me tailor the podcast. It reminds me of topics I've forgotten about, that I didn't do that are important. So I love that you reached out to me. And I also love that you send me little fan notes. I love that.
Yeah. No, I love the way you interview people with such honesty and curiosity. And it's great. The information that you give us is fabulous. So really, thank you.
Well, that's the secret, is the guest.
Yeah.
And getting out of their way. And so as my guest, I would love you to start talking about what you do. And full disclosure, you are from the UK. Most of my listeners are actually from the US. I have them from all over the world, but most are from the US. So I would love for you to say what you do and give us a little bit of a picture of what it's like in the educational world in the UK, please.
So I'm usually at the end of the phone call, either from schools or from parents. It's usually a desperate cry the time they call me. Either it's because schools have called them to say something's the matter and they never thought anything is the matter, or schools are having a hard time trying to get through to a parent, or they've tried everything they could and they couldn't. And typically, if you think about it, it's usually you've got let's put this together. My role is to come in and to assess a child. But when I say I come in to assess a child, I know a lot of schools want me to come and see the holes of the child, but I like to see the whole of the child.
I love that.
And I want to see the situation rather than, all the little bits. They want me to see this little child in a little room and tell me all the problems. And that's not my way. I like to see the whole situation, what's going on around school, around home, and everything together so that we can help to put a package in place or help school know what to do next, or parents what to do next. So really, if we call this as advocacy, I'm going to speak about the parents here, not today, not schools. This is what I like to try and tell parents, is that there are three people here in this thing. There's the parents, you've got the school, and then you've got the professionals. So the expert on the child is actually the parent. They are the absolute experts. They know what makes a child cry. They know what makes a child smile. They know the joys of the child. They know the sorrows. They're really the expert of the child. And then you've got the professionals, and they are the experts of diagnosis. They are the experts of syndromes. They're the experts of profiles and behaviors. And then you've got the school, who are the experts on systems, because you need a system within your school. And hopefully they're also experts in delivering some form of good curriculum for majority of the children. And I know most people see it, sort of as a triangle. And I try to tell parents, actually, it's not a triangle, but the school and the professionals are what we call petrol, or what you call gas, and the engine of the car. And the parent is actually in that driving seat. And they are there to help the child, to make the decisions and to push what they need for their child. As the child gets older, and if they're cognitively able, if they're able, I like to say that they should start giving a little bit of that seat to the child, and then the parent becomes the driving instructor, if you'd like.
Right, it's like teaching driving.
Yeah, they can't anymore.
You could hire somebody for that, by the way. I didn't teach my kids to drive. It's okay.
Yeah. So then at that point, the child becomes sort of the driver, and the parent is helping them along the road to where they need to get to. But every situation is very, very different. And when I meet one parent, there'll be one answer, and I meet another parent, there'll be another answer. But I think the key, if I'd have to find just one thing, it would be curious. You have to be curious. So you call this mama bear, and I would say you have to be the most curious mama bear out there. And if you keep with this curious lens all the time, that's how you're going to be a really great advocate for your child. So as a parent, be curious about your parenting style. Who are you as a parent? Are you the kind of mother that can sit down and do, 20 minutes of English reading homework or the Hebrew Kriya homework with your child, and you won't get impatient and you'll enjoy every bit of it, even if you have to repeat it 20 times? Or can you do the spellings again and again? Or are you the kind of parent that says, not me, not spellings, I don't do this? Who are you as a parent? Are you the kind of person that gets triggered when the school calls you every few minutes? Are you the kind of parent who is bringing baggage, like a little bit, the buzzword is trauma, but if you just say bring your life with it, I get parents to sit down and tell me, oh, I was impossible in school, or I had exactly the same like my child, because very often that's how it is. The child is the same as the parent. And I'm fine today, it's fine. Schools should stop fussing. Or I get the complete flip side, where parents will say, I went through hell in school, and I don't want my child to go through hell, and I'm not going to allow that for my child. So being curious who you are, because both are no good. The child has their own life and has their own way, and you can't relive your life with the child, through the child. So being really curious who you are as a parent and what you're bringing to the table as a parent is going to help how you can advocate for your child when you know yourself best. And the same as being curious to school. How does the school work? Some schools are very accommodating. Some schools are just tolerant. They're not accommodating. They'll just tolerate you as long as you're quiet. And getting really to know, who is the school that you're dealing with? Are they nice? Are they kind? Are they just, very academic and that's all they push? And when you have that information in your hand, you can then advocate better for your child. And the same about professionals. You have to know, what professionals are you going to? Who are you going to? Why are you going to them? I use always the example of, you go into the showroom to buy a new car, and they say, this is the latest sports model, 2 doors. And you're so excited, you buy it and you go out the door with it. And then you realize, 1 minute, I have to do what we call in England rota. You call it something else, carpool. And I need a minivan. What am I going to do?
Sorry, what's that expression? Road?
We call it rota.
Road-ta?
Yeah, rota. Yeah.
Where we have rota, R-O-T-A, like rotation?
Yeah. Okay. You call it carpool. And you really need a minivan. So why did you take that? And parents are spending in England thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds in therapy. You asked me, what do we get? Very, very little. And I can ask parents, so what's your child getting? I tell them speech therapy. What's the child doing at speech therapy? And they can't answer me. They don't have a clue. And like you would go in to buy a car and you would start saying, well, how many doors do I need? Why do I need it? You've got to do the same for your child. You can't just take whatever people are offering you and think, okay, speech therapy. Why, what, how? So you have to really be become quite a curious person. So if we go back to your question, is what is my role as an educational consultant is very much putting parents in the driving seat, getting them to start asking questions, getting them to start being really curious about their child so they can then advocate for their child. You asked me about health education systems in England. There is no money, by and large. The only time you will get money is if you get, I think you call it an IEP.
Yes, an individualized educational plan.
We call it an EHCP. It's educational health care plan. It's not easy to get. I don't know if it's easy to get in America.
It depends.
And even when you do get it, sometimes you'll get a decent amount of money, sometimes you won't. You've got quite a number of children who have it, but you've got to be significantly challenged to receive an EHCP. So it's out of pocket.
Right, and you're out of pocket too, right? Parents are reaching out to you privately.
Absolutely.
Right.
You're not getting anything free here. Maybe even under fives, you get very, very little. It's not like America, but under fives, you're not getting that.
Wow. So I want to go back to something you said. That was fantastic, by the way. I want to go back to something you said about the parents bringing in their own trauma or baggage. And I feel like I say this in so many podcasts. You have to put your oxygen mask on first. I'm a big believer in taking care of your own emotional issues so that you can better help your child. Because you also mentioned why I called it Mama Bear. Mama Bear and kind of implies somebody in fighting mode, Arnold Schwarzenegger, boom, boom, boom. Oh, I'll be back, right? So that's not really what I meant to imply, because actually, if you go at it with that, fierceness, you can actually undermine. I love that word curiosity that you used over and over and over, but you can only be calm and curious, right? If you're in the right place as a parent. And that's hard. It's so hard. It's really hard.
It really, really is hard. It is. And that is why I do use the word curious. And I do tell parents, please be curious about yourself first. It's really important to know where you're standing in this with your child. Otherwise, you can't, as you say, you're just going to be a fighting Mama Bear. I didn't see it as the fighting when I saw Mama Bear. I saw it as the nurturing, not, I didn't see it as a fighter. When you fight, you get hurt. If you just go bulldozing into a school fighting, a lot of times you can just end up getting hurt. You've got to be very clever when you fight. You have to.
Right. But in our system here, a lot of times the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And so that is kind of, in a way, the role model. But more services is not necessarily the answer. It's the right services, the right school, the right everything. So I want to start with some typical scenarios. I like to start with probably age 5, 6, around the time they're really doing academics. And I'll give you the scenario of the teacher calls the parent and says, your child's not paying attention.
Yeah. So I would say that age 5 is a very sort of serious time. It's serious for many reasons, because either something's really going on, and at age 5 we can get it. It's great. We can really help the child. But it's also a hard age because they're making that transition from nursery, what we call nursery, I don't know what you call it, to school. Schools can come in very hard and very harsh at little children who are struggling, and you sometimes do need to give them a little bit of time. So this is the time where really parents need to be a really good advocate for their kids, because at that point we're not sure yet what's going on. So if we take it from the curious lens again, and the school are phoning you to say something's the matter with your child, there's a little bit of a joke where you say that if somebody tells you that you're a horse, you laugh because you're not a horse. But when the second person tells you you're a horse, you sort of make that face. But when a third person tells you you're a horse, you go out and buy a saddle. And I tell that to parents, like, where else have you heard that your child is struggling? Has your neighbor ever mentioned something to you? Has your mother-in-law said something to you? And when you start being curious about who else has told me something's the matter with my child, you'll start hearing that maybe something really is the matter with my child. And that will be like your first indicator to say, okay, so it's something a bit broader than just school. And again, I'd be very, very curious. I'd be saying to the school, what happened last year? Why didn't I hear anything last year? Is it in particular subjects? Is it in particular with particular teachers? You'll be surprised. I was just listening to a podcast this morning about somebody who's dealing with ADHD. And he was saying it's very interesting that some kids need medication. He was very for medication. And he was still saying that with some teachers, a kid needs desperately medication. And with some teachers, the kid doesn't seem to need medication. So you need to find out, be really curious before you just jump in there to find out what's going on in school. Is it the academic side? Is it the social side? Is it just the structure that's come about? And when you start asking all these questions, you'll be able to start working with the school to find out how you can help your child. I think that at this point, I want to make quite a crucial point, is that when you start trying to help your child, and when the school starts bombarding you with information with something's the matter, and it is something the matter, and it could end up being something quite significant sometimes, or could end up being really just a school issue. A parent can come home feeling really, really anxious and feeling really, really, really frustrated by all the noise that's coming from school. And if you want to be a good advocate for your child, you really, really need to stand back, take a deep, deep breath, and just remember it's your child at home. Forget all those troubles, put them away on the doorstep when the child comes in, and try and just see your child for being a child instead of just getting really, really anxious. I see parents start doing, the homework with the child and the homework with the child, and the child starts becoming anxious on top of it, on top of it. So the biggest gift really you can give your child is if at home things stay kind of the same, and you don't need to tell them if the headmistress called 100 times to complain about the behaviors. At home, let it be a haven, let it be a safe place for your child. Come home and be there for your child. That's not to say you're not going to tell them off, once or twice if something they're misbehaving in school or something, but they're struggling, and you have to understand that the child struggle in school, let it stay kind of in school. And a parent's got enough sometimes to struggle with at home. They don't need the school's baggage and all that. Right. I don't know how you find schools, but sometimes schools can be really, really heavy on the deficit of.
Oh no, for sure.
And it's really, really challenging. And the only way you can really be a good advocate for your kid is when you really believe in your child and you can see the good and see the brilliant stuff in your child. I'll give you one funny example. A kid was going from primary to high school, and this mother was a fabulous, fabulous advocate for her child. She gave her, made sure to give her loads of language help. She was quite significantly dyslexic and had quite a significant language disorder. And she'd really advocated well. It was a lovely primary school. They listened to her. They let her advocate for her child. They let her bring in specialists. And then the kid was moving on to a very sophisticated high school, and she wants to go into the high school. She had a meeting set up to tell them all about her child. And she phoned and said, what should I say? And I kind of put a stop to it. And I said, you're running into a high school. You don't know enough about the high school. You don't know if they're very highly academic. You don't know if they will listen to you. You don't know if they're nice. You're going to give them all that information about your child and all the deficits and all the problems. They might use it against you. She said, should I cancel my meeting? And I'm like, absolutely not. You don't cancel. Instead, tell me about your child. What is your child going to be when they're older? What do you think? She tells me my child's going to be an architect, 100%. The way she draws, the way she does the numbers. I said, you go into the meeting and you start this way. My child one day is going to be an architect. She will be drawing the plans for your new building one day. She's amazing. She's gifted. She's talented. But she has a little bit of difficulty with language and with reading. And I need you as a school to support my daughter to help me so that she can get through the language and get through the reading and get through school so that she can access this, the A-levels and the studying to become one day this fantastic architect. And just by spinning it, she went into the meeting in such a different way than just saying, oh, my child's got all these language difficulties and all these problems. And only when you're in touch with your child and see the beauty in your child and see the gifts that your child has with these difficulties, will you be able to be a really, really good advocate for your child.
Okay, that was fantastic. I can't underscore that enough. And the point that you're making is you need to lead with strengths. You need to see your child's strengths. And that is, by the way, a problem of our system too, is it is deficit-based. In order to fight for services, you have to look at the deficits. And I always say you have to look at it like almost like the picture. There's a picture with one way it's a beautiful lady, and another way it's an old woman. Do you know that picture?
Brilliant.
Right? And you
Brilliant.
can't see them at the same time. You can't do it, but you have to try, because in order to get the services, right, or in order to be realistic about the deficits, you're being realistic. You can't help your child unless you are able to face what the issues are. But first and foremost should be your child's strengths. And no one is going to be able to advocate for your child or to see your child like that, like you can. So that is incredible. That is absolutely incredible.
But like what you said, acceptance is not denial. Acceptance
Right.
of your child's difficulties, the diagnosis in ASD or ADHD, acceptance isn't denial. Acceptance is saying, okay, they have these difficulties and I can have hope and I can have expectations, but there's still a child underneath all that. And there's and I think we have a problem that we allow school to define our children. And school grades and school behavior can't define who our children are going to be one day. And I deal with 40-year-olds and 30-year-olds who will tell me like, oh, I'd love to study something, but I was such a dunce in school. I'm so useless. I can't. Let school to let you decide that you can't study. You're smart. If you want to study something, that means you have a passion. If you have a passion, you'll find a way. Get yourself a tutor, get a really good computer program. I don't know. But who said you can't do it? School? You're allowing school, who told you that you were a fool 20, 30 years ago, to stop you from moving anywhere? School can't define who our children are. And school is a very hard place for a lot of our children. For the ADHD kids, when it's not exciting enough and not motivating enough. For our dyslexic kids, I have my biggest passion is the dyslexic kids. Mm. School mustn't define our children. They really, really can't.
Right. Speaking of schools, I think that if you have a choice, I don't know if where you are, there are choices for schools, like you just go straight from one level to the next without a choice.
No, really no choice.
Oh, so here there are for many people, not always, especially at the high school level, but sometimes, even at the elementary level. I mean, sometimes you live in a community where there is the community school and that's it. But in many communities, there are multiple schools, and sometimes the schools have reputations, and the parent will think, well, I want my brilliant child to be in the best school, but the best school is not necessarily the best school for your child. And I think one of the criteria should be, are they going to work with me and my child to bring out my child's strengths and to help accommodate their challenges?
It's a struggle. That is a struggle. But I think the only way you could really, really do that is get somebody who you trust, who knows you, knows your child, knows the school system, and can help you with that. Because sometimes we might not really see how much our children are struggling in school, and we think, okay, we could push them a little bit more. Sometimes you do really need somebody on the outside who's not attached to the particular school, who can come in and support you with that. And I really do tell parents to reach out when they're trying to make big decisions, like even going from a mainstream to a special, from a special to a mainstream. You need to have somebody who can go in there with all that emotion. I mean, I'm a parent, and I get very, I'm saying all these lovely things, but as a parent, it's really challenging. And that's why sometimes I have called somebody on the outside to come in and help me out with the school, because I was getting too emotionally involved and getting upset. And somebody outside could come in and just see it in a different light. And if, again, curious, if you're open, then you will hear what you have to hear, and you will hear whether you should be fighting for something or whether you shouldn't be fighting for something. If you just go as a bull, go as a bull in a china shop, you'll just knock everything down, and you won't get very far. So
right, and sorry, and back to the child who you don't have a choice on school. I love the idea of the home as a haven, because that is something that you can always add to from the home setting, or summer, after school, things that will help bring out your child's abilities, even if the school is not doing that. So that's one thing I'm thinking. What about behavioral? I'm sorry.
What did we say? What about?
I was going to move on, but we had something to say. I'm so sorry.
I was going to say something about school, that I think that with schools, again, if you go with this sort of curiosity and you have a challenge, and instead of going in there with a solution, and you come in there talking about the problem rather than the solution, you never know. You could get sometimes a school to come with you and to help you along the way. For example, I was just thinking of a parent who had called me recently and said that the OT that the school has, occupational therapy that the school has, therapist, is not the best. She doesn't have really good sensory, for example, training, and she really felt the child needed something more. So should I, make a big song and dance, the school to have a better OT in there, or should I just take my child and take them privately? It takes an hour each way to a really, really good one somewhere, quite a distance away. And I said, 1 minute, let's be curious. What is the problem? Don't give me the solution. What's the problem? You need your child to have a better occupational therapist that can give you the sensory regulation, the sensory diets, whatever you need. Taking your child out of school, an hour there, an hour back, and an hour sitting at the OT who can't even talk to school because now she's against the school. She might be brilliant, but how does that help you? So let's go to the school and let's tell them we have a child who really needs to be helped with her sensory regulations. What can we do? The OT you have right now is great. She's doing lovely work with fine motor. She's doing lovely work with visual perception and other stuff. What can we do? And we had a little discussion and we came up with an idea out of the box that the OT from an hour away will come, create a little program, perhaps provide a sensory diet, which will then feed into the school as a one-off, maybe revisit again in 6 months' time, and everybody's happy. So you don't always have to come with solutions, banging down the school with what you need. But if you come with a problem and you sit down with, as long as they're decent people, and then you'll sit down with them and discuss it with them, you might actually be surprised that they're happy to listen to you sometimes.
I have 2 points from that. Number one is the schlep factor. I want to talk about just a little bit more because I do see people who think more is more and they want to get the best person. So I think that that's an important point, that you have to factor in the schlep factor. The other point is that I think we have to have realistic expectations.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And again, when I say that the school are the experts on systems, so a lot of parents will say, how can a school do that? They're taking my child out of PE and giving them their literacy. How can they do something like that? PE is the only thing my child loves, and they're really getting, really up in arms about it. And they're right. They are right. But I tell them, let's be curious about the system. Do you think your child is the only child in the school? Then they have 30 other children who have to have the literacy support. We can try, we can go and say, please, it would make such a difference to little Yankee or Chaim, whoever it is, if just don't touch PE, please. That's the time that he loves. Try do it some other place. But you've got to be realistic that it's a system of school. They've got procedure, they've got stuff going. Choose your battles, pick your battles. If your battle is to not take him out of PE, great, but you can't come every day into a school bashing the place down with all your demands. You've got to come with a balance and understand that if they start hearing you scream and shout over every little thing, when you need the big things, you're not going to get it. Do you find the same with that?
No, absolutely. It gets to be like, just wear them down. They just tune you out. Right? Either you become the adversarial parent who they really are hiding from, or you're just the whiner. And neither of those are effective.
But again, you're saying being an adversarial parent, and as a parent, I can say picking up the phone to a school, as nice as the school is, it's a real challenge.
Yeah.
And sometimes I just want to call and just make a little comment that I know would really help my child. I struggle. I really struggle. And yet I'm telling parents, pick up the phone, just tell them. They're very nice. They would listen to you. And it's really hard being your own advocate. If you could go in and get someone to help you, it's really the best. But I understand that you don't always want to pay someone to be there for you, because then you feel, what's the matter? I can't do it. But we feel that the schools are doing us a favor in a way, and we feel the school are trying so hard. Yes, they keep mucking up certain things. You've told them 100 times, stop coming down on my child with exams. They need to do it orally. Why do you keep giving it to them on a piece of paper? Why can't you be a bit nicer? How many times do I have to tell you? And you feel like, what, I pick up the phone again and tell them? And you feel so frustrated as parents. So one way is to get the child to be the advocate. So one parent is crying away, why is the teacher doing it again? Or why the Rebbe it was? How many times can I tell him? He kept the child in break because he didn't answer all the questions. He knows he can't answer all the questions. I said, 1 minute, your child is 10.
Right.
10. Can we get your child to start saying, I'm so sorry, Rebbe. Remember we discussed, or my tati discussed, or whatever it was, that I'm only going to do 5, and then you're going to ask me. And she was like, what? I shouldn't pick up the phone and shout? You know, I said, you told me you've picked up the phone 10 times and it hasn't helped. Let's make the child now. And I said, even more than that, I said, who is helping your son in Cheder? So she told me it was a Rebbe who's doing one-to-one tuition Gemara. I said, call the Gemara teacher in. He's going to have now another role in the school. Do you know what his role is now going to be? His role is going to help your son advocate for himself. And where he needs a little bit of a push, this one-to-one tuition guy, this Rebbe, he's going to be the one to do the little bit of advocacy so that we can push the parent a little bit to not having to pick up the phone every 2 minutes. And that worked brilliantly. Every time the child saw this private tuition Rebbe, who was only for Gemara, really, that big person became his confidant. That person became, how's it going? How's your test doing? Not just, here's the Gemara, here's the skills, let's go. And the more I pushed these private, I don't know what you call them, we call them LSAs. I think you call them shadows, or you call them, I don't know, you have.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I push these private one-to-one teachers. I say, you might be teaching spelling, but do me a favor, spend 3 minutes, ask them how it's going, ask them where they need help them become resilient, you know, empower them what to tell their teachers, give the child a voice, and try and be the voice of the child where the child can't be the voice. So to try and move the parent away from having to pick up the phone every 5 minutes.
That is such an important point. That is such an incredibly important point. First of all, that's one of the pieces of build your team, right? That you can't do this on your own.
Can't.
Right. But another piece of it is find somebody in that school setting who's part of the system who can partner with you.
That is gold.
Yeah.
If you can find that one person who gets you, gets your child, and can do what a parent can do and say, no, this kid isn't being stubborn. He's just being determined. Just change, really, really can change a child's life. You know, a child misbehaving in class, and that person can just say, think for a minute, why were they misbehaving? What was going on? Perhaps they're scared of the spelling test. Perhaps it's just, you know, this is their way of the social hierarchy in the classroom. Yeah, the social can cause an enormous trouble for children. Really, I see kids really act out terribly because of what's going on socially within a classroom, particularly with ASD or even with ADHD. And just to give that child a voice. If you can find someone in the school, you're set to go.
Right. And it could be anybody. It could be the person who serves lunches, you know.
Absolutely.
That is incredibly, incredibly important. It really, really is. That is one of the most valuable things. The other thing is, you know, school can feel to a parent like a black box, right? You send your kid there and then it becomes, well, they said, and your child says, and you don't know who to believe. And so that's one of the solutions, right? Is have somebody who's there.
True, but even so, I would say don't get involved, because I don't know what's going on in school. And when school call me as a parent and say to me, you know, your child did X and Y and Z, maybe, maybe not. I mean, I don't know. I wasn't there. And I don't get too hung up. I really don't. And I've had a parent call me that she woke her child up in the middle of the night to tell her child off because the parent had called to tell her something. That's how bad she felt it was. My child's not going to misbehave. And she told the child off. She found out a few days later that the story wasn't exactly the way the teacher had told the parent. You know, it was something slightly different. The child had said what she had said because the teacher had asked her a question that could be taken 2 ways, and the child hadn't been as chutzpahdik as, you know, the teacher had said. I feel so guilty. I woke my child up in the middle of the night to tell my child off that you dare behave like that again. And I said, why did he get involved? You know, we need to tell our kids, we have to behave. And I don't want chutzpah as a mother. It hurts me when my child doesn't behave in school. But I'm not there. I'm not there.
Right. And back to that curiosity, right? Imagine if you just sat down and you were curious and you listened to your child.
Amazing.
Right.
You'll get the full story. Not, you know, even if the story is...
No,
you'll get the full story from her perspective.
Exactly.
So it might not be the perspective of the teachers, and it might be a bit of a wonky story from the child, but you will watch her face and you will see she's really nervous about how she's telling you that story. She's scared. She's angry. I mean, one of the things that I really enjoy is working with really sensitive children. I don't know if you've read the book Orchids and Dandelions. Really, really excellent
This
book.
is the highly sensitive personality. I haven't read it.
well, there was one about, he's done a lot of research on the sensitive children, nurture versus nature. Very interesting.
But it's the HSP idea, right? The highly sensitive person.
Yeah. And so I do enjoy reading that. And I understand these kind of children. So when they come home saying, they're up in arms and they're angry, and it's really real. It's for them, it's real. It's like I will tell teachers, you will tell a child, can you please follow? We're all learning now. Could you put your finger on the place and follow along? One child will say, oh, all right, I'll follow. And they'll follow. Another child will say, all right, why should I follow? Or whatever, can't be bothered. And the highly sensitive child will say, a minute ago, you didn't tell me that how good I am for following. And yesterday I followed and you only picked me. What about the other girl around the corner? She's look at her, she's not even following. And then 6 sessions later, you've got a completely different teacher, and the child's still up in arms. The child is still giving the teacher giving a different teacher completely a hard time because of in the morning, a teacher had told her to follow. And it sounds ridiculous, but if you get to understand sensitive children and you get to understand what makes them tick and why they're behaving the way they're behaving, you listen, you'll hear.
Right. And I think validating your child's, side of the story, their feelings, doesn't mean that you have to believe that that's actually what happened, but the validation of the feelings.
But even if you tell your child, I'm sitting on the fence here, I don't, it's irrelevant who's right, school right. Yeah, it's irrelevant. And I will tell my own children that school have a system. And whether you're right or whether you're wrong, you've got to learn the game of school. So it doesn't help, standing there like I was saying at the beginning, of those parents that want to sort of cocoon their child with, I'm not going to let my child go through what I went through. There's a school system here, and your child's going to have to learn it pretty quickly. That in school, that's not how you behave. Or even if you're angry, you can't throw your books off the table, because in school that doesn't work.
Right. And that's not helpful advocacy when you're just trying to protect your child. Right?
Not going to work.
You're not going to build resilience that way. That's not helpful at all.
No.
Okay. Let's talk about resources for additional support. I guess it would be different in your country than in our country. You talked about paying for services outside of school.
You pay for everything in school as well.
You pay for everything in school as well.
You pay for private tuition. You pay for absolutely everything.
Wow.
A few schools might have a little budget that they might give a little bit towards the private tuition, but not really.
Right. So for here, we have a whole system in America with, evaluations that are free through the district. And they start at birth to 3. There's one system called early intervention. Then there's a committee for preschool special education for 3 to 5. And then 5 and up. The importance of that transition is that at that point, you need to have a diagnosis. Before then, you just either you qualify or you don't. And after that, you need to have some kind of diagnosis to fit into their classifications. But that's beyond the scope, because this is not your area, not your country. And I think I'm going to try to do more on this topic in another talk. What about evaluations in your country?
They're pricey.
You have to get them privately.
You have to get most of them privately. Unless you're doing something like for a diagnosis of ADHD, you can be on an NHS waiting list for a very long time. So education stuff like an educational psychologist that you're paying for out of pocket. But if you want a psychiatrist, or if you want a psychologist or clinical psychologist or something like that, that you can get through the NHS, but a very long waiting list. So you get put on and you wait and you wait and you wait and you wait. And they don't always get the nuances of being a religious boy in a Cheder system. They won't always get that. So which can be a bit tough. But even within the assessment, even if it's free, we have this thing about really over assessing nowadays, like really pushing your kids through 101 evaluations. And it's hard on a child, even if it's free, to be constantly being assessed. And again, here's your curiosity when parents say to me, should I spend £1,500 to do, school are telling me go to the education psychologist to go here. Again, I'd say be curious and say, why? What are you going to do with the results? I mean, I have seen 20-page reports going into the nearest bin. Because what should school do with these pages and pages? So their memory is at, whatever percentile, and what's school going to do with that? So sometimes I would push and say, yes, please spend the money and go to the top psychiatrist that you can, or get a really good clinical psychologist on board, or a good educational psychologist on board. But by and large, you don't always need that full, thick report that tells you all the little tiny details of how your brain is working.
Right. I mean, the evaluation that you get in America through the school district is very superficial. People can choose to pay thousands and thousands of dollars for a private neuropsychological evaluation. And again, that information may or may not be necessary. And it's very costly and out of reach of many parents, and usually not covered by insurance.
Right. So that's the same problem.
It's a pretty similar problem. And I do agree that it's not necessary in many cases to have all that information.
It's necessary when school are saying one thing and parents are saying another thing, and we're having a back and forth argument constantly. Then on the school side, they need to hear that it's fine. The child is not as bad as they're saying, or is as bad as they're saying. And I say to a parent, look, if school are constantly telling you that this is a problem, I've had it with a child that, I really want them to go for, school wanted them to go for a psychiatrist. And they were saying, no. I said, your kid's going to get kicked out with you saying, no. If you really believe your child doesn't have a problem, well, spend the £1,500, take him to a psychiatrist, and you'll have a paper to say that nothing's the matter with your child. So why are you fighting this paper? Do you know what I'm saying?
Right. It's actually cheaper for you. £1,500 is what, like $500 here or something, like 600?
No, it's nearly the rate is about 1,200. It would be.
Oh, it's really close. I thought it used to be I don't remember. No. So it is pretty close to it. Here it's thousands of dollars.
But it depends what a psychiatrist would be much more. An educational psychologist would be like 1.5.
Here, neuropsychological evaluation is thousands of dollars usually.
Wow.
It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money, and it gives a ton of information that's not necessarily needed. And again, I'm not here to provide any specific advice to anybody. We're just making the point that, you have to weigh the risks and benefits of anything that you do. And it's also the risk of pulling your child out and having them sit there and also often face, tiny little details of their deficits over and over and over.
Yes. And sometimes all you get is a page full of deficits.
Right.
And sometimes getting somebody like myself or somebody who's just like a specialist teacher to come in and just sort of say, okay, what's going on right now in this situation? What's going on? Your child's not getting through her geography exam. How can we help them sit through that geography exam or whatever it may be? Instead of getting so bogged down with all the tiny little details. Sometimes it is useful because then you can say, okay, so it's a language difficulty. Let's get a really good speech therapist in. But I don't think you have to spend always thousands of dollars, like as you say, each time. I think schools do it because they don't know where to send. They don't know what to do. So they just sort of said, okay, get a really good evaluation.
Right. They have a problem and they want it fixed. And that's a good segue into ADHD. I just want to talk about it for a minute. I don't know what it's like in the UK. You said it may take a while to get a diagnosis, but do you have regular physicians just making the diagnosis on their own and prescribing medication while they're waiting?
The regular GP?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
No? In America, the pediatricians will prescribe ADHD medication.
They might be able to prescribe if you push, but I don't think they would do it if you don't have an official diagnosis, and your GP wouldn't be giving you a diagnosis. It wouldn't be your GP.
So do you have I'm wondering if you have lower rates of kids taking medication since there's such a barrier to get the diagnosis and therefore the medication.
I think we do. Mm-hmm. I think as it is England, we have a different culture anyway. So that culture of being slow and why should we medicate we're always behind. So that will be anyway. Here, if I have a parent who tells me I really want medication, they would have to go to push it. They would have to go privately to get it quick because
We have the opposite problem here. We have the problem where the school will say, please go to your pediatrician. I think your child has ADHD. Go get your kid on medication. And I, as a pediatrician, find that very problematic because a child can be, we mentioned the scenario of the child who's not paying attention. And we started talking about the different reasons why the child might not be paying attention. It is not necessarily due to ADHD, right?
And it could be ADHD.
It could be.
It could be. But there's still, when parents say to me, what should I do? Medicate or not medicate? Personally, medication is a bit like politics and religion. It's a bit of a dodgy subject to speak about.
But we're going to do it.
People get really sensitive and very upset in England, for sure. When you mention medication, they get really upset. And I tell schools, pill is not a magic pill.
Mm-hmm.
The child's not going to suddenly sit. I don't know what you're thinking. If you don't have skill and pill,
right,
nothing's going to happen. So let's try and do skill first. Let's start there. Let's start somewhere. When we've started with skill, we can then say, look, it's not working. Let's go for pill. And then we've got skill and pill together. But on its own, just pill. What's the kitchen? Be quiet in the room. How does that help you? I would also say that the parents are very, very nervous about putting kids on medication here. Definitely. I would say there's more saying they don't want than wanting. And I think it's pushing parents away from getting a diagnosis of ADHD, because they're saying, so I'll get the diagnosis. All you're going to then tell me is put my child on pill.
Right.
So I don't want the diagnosis, but you can't tell me put my child on the pill. And I always have to say, go on.
Right, which is a problem when the child actually is struggling with primary ADHD as the problem. It's really a big problem. I see the same thing here. I see tremendous resistance to medication. However, to me, the bigger systemic problem is jumping on the diagnosis without a proper evaluation. And here, to get a real good evaluation is often out of pocket, often a long wait, and the pediatricians can prescribe it, but we here have very short visits. And so it's not uncommon for a child to come to me and I'll say, wait a minute, why does the teacher think it's ADHD? Let's look at some other reasons. But it takes time to do that, right?
You've got to give it time. An ADHD diagnosis is not a walk in the park. It's not fun to have ADHD. As much as they talk nowadays of the advantages of having ADHD when you're older and you're going to become the new entrepreneur or something, it's no fun. It really is no fun. And just to jump on it. And to give you another example, I saw a little child the child was only in about 7 or 8. And I came in there and she said to me, you know what? The head said to me, I don't actually know why I called you in, because really I should have just told the parent, ADHD, get the diagnosis, get medication, and that's it. Why am I now starting with you? What do I need you for now? I said, let me just see. I sat down with this child. The child wasn't able to read, really struggling. The child was already 7 or 8 at that point, but she was jumping around, so nobody even realized that actually the child can't read.
Right.
And the first thing I said to the school is, I'm not saying it's not ADHD. It's not for me to say yes or no, but can you teach the child to read? And maybe once the child can read, you might actually see that the ADHD is not so ADHD anymore.
Right. I mean, you can have both. In other words, the child may not have a learning disability and ADHD, and some of these kids may require medication so that they can then ameliorate their dyslexia.
Absolutely. But so they started on teaching the child to read. I came back a year later. The child still has ADHD. No one's taking the ADHD away, but she's not racing around the classroom the way she was then, because then she was racing around the classroom as distraction. She couldn't join the sessions. She wasn't part of the class. If you can't learn and you can't read, I mean, what are you meant to do in the classroom? So yes, she still might have ADHD, and maybe one day they might still have to go for medication. But it was a different child to walk through my door. She walked through my door and she sat herself down. And I was like, oh, blinking. Is this the ADHD kid that I was jumping up and down the chair when I saw her a year back? She sat. I did an assessment, a literacy assessment. She did nicely. It was like a different child.
Wow. Because there's many different pieces of, of the problem going on here. They say ADHD is highly comorbid. It's highly associated with other things. And that's the problem, is that a pill for ADHD is not going to solve a learning disability. And by the way, it may exacerbate anxiety, which is what I was thinking of. I think kids who are anxious are often called ADHD because they're not paying attention, because their mind is so spinning in their worries. And the medication can actually make that worse. And so taking the time to figure out what's going on. They might have both. They might just have anxiety. They might have trauma. They might have a lot of family dysfunction. So,
but I think what you brought out about monitoring, I think that's where it gets sticky. Why people don't want to really put their children on medication is, I don't think every child is being monitored very carefully. Right. And sometimes a little drop less or a little drop more will be the success. And if they're not being monitored by either the school saying, okay, today wasn't good, today was bad, okay, she was quiet, we're happy. or the parent not knowing what's going on in the school to report back to the doctor to say it's no good, the child's having a side effect, or we're just seeing a stupid child, or we're seeing the kid still racing around. It's so, you need to get, if you speak to the people that are on medication, as adults, where they can then control it by themselves and go back to the doctor and say, excuse me, it's not working for me right now, could we change it? It takes time to get it right. And I don't know what you think. Do you think the children are receiving it, or it's being monitored till we get it right?
So in some cases, with a really good clinician and a really strong advocating parent, yes, we definitely have that capacity. We have follow-up Vanderbilt scales that can be given to the school and the parent. That's the way it's supposed to be done. Is it really done that way most of the time? I don't think so. And that goes back, by the way, to helping the child advocate for themselves. I had a child that came in and said, I'm no longer on medication because I don't need it. It made me feel worse. It did not help me focus. This parent is being an amazing advocate and teaching the child to self-advocate.
And what do you do?
Phenomenal. It is, the child's doing phenomenally well without medication. So you can have ADHD and not necessarily be on medication. It is not, I always say, it's not like strep, you need antibiotics, ADHD, you need Ritalin. It's not one-to-one like that. And starting with trying to make accommodations and modifications, and also helping your child understand that this is the way their brain works. This child is actually a big neurodiversity advocate. It's fantastic. It's absolutely fantastic. So that those are things that we can do, and we don't have to be, cowed by the school.
But at the same time, the medication is fabulous scaffolding.
Mm-hmm.
We can then build, and we can build, and slowly
Right.
we can take down the scaffolding. And I've seen some kids just flower.
Right.
All of a sudden they're listening, and we can get to them. And it's amazing. Right.
I do see also the flip side where the child really needs medication, and the parents have tried everything, and they've tried alternative treatments and, neuro, whatever that thing is called, processing that, what is that thing called? Neuro something training, fish oil, they've tried diets, they've tried gluten-free, casein-free, sugar-free, they've tried all these things, and the child is still really not able to pay attention. And they've tried everything else, and they just don't want medication. And I understand that. I do.
And it's not just the child not learning. It's the feeling of failure again and again and again. And at the end of the day, you've taken a child of 16 years in school, however long they stay in the school system, to come out feeling like a bag of nothing. That's damage.
Right. And social. These kids often suffer socially tremendously.
And sometimes if they would take the medication and we could actually help them, they wouldn't suffer, and they would come out of school just being so much more wholesome.
Right. That's really hard. And that, again, goes back to the parent being realistic. Right. I mean, some parents will say, okay, I'm going to put my child in a different school. They may have a choice, and they may put their child in a school where they're able to accommodate. Not everybody has that choice. But sometimes parents don't even see it that way. They just like, why can't you do X, Y, Z? So my child will pay attention. Why don't you be the one-on-one teacher, right, for my child, constantly redirecting, etc. But that's not realistic in a class of 25 to 30 kids.
No, impossible.
Right.
I think teachers are doing a great job. They work very hard. They're trying
so
very
hard.
They're really trying their best. They have to do, the ADHD child, the ASD child, the dyslexic child, the sensitive child, the kid who's coming from a dysfunctional home. And they have to know what to do for each one. I'd get a parent calling me up and saying on the first day of school, ridiculous, this new teacher. She didn't give any rules to the class. She told the children, you're old enough. My daughter got up to get a drink, and the teacher came down. What do you think you're doing? Don't you think it's important that the parent said to me, the teacher should come down on the first day with a bunch of rules? And I was like, could be. I get a phone call 5 minutes later from a different parent who's saying, what do you say to this teacher who walked in on the first day, a whole load of rules? My child was so scared, she refuses to go to school tomorrow. Don't you think it's ridiculous? Teachers should not be giving rules on the first day of school like that. My child is now anxiety going through the roof. Wow. So where should the teacher put herself? Should she be giving rules? Should she not be giving rules? What works for one doesn't necessarily work for the other. And that's going back to advocacy. And you can tell the school or tell the teacher what does work for your child. They can be mindful, and they can try and help.
Right, but to have realistic expectations. In your system, is there an age for starting, like a cutoff age for kindergarten?
The kids go very young kids. They go at 3, 4, 5, and then they start reception as ready at 5. They're turning 5 in reception where they start learning reading and writing.
Right, so that would be like what we call kindergarten here. So do they start, is there a cutoff for that start point? That's what I'm trying to get to, because here there's an issue of what they call redshirting, which is keeping a child back an extra year.
So some schools are difficult about that. We have our cutoff is September.
Okay.
Which works very nicely with academic year. I think yours is December, no? Isn't yours?
Right, December, sometimes even January. So we have some kids who are starting kindergarten still 4 years old.
Right, so our September works very well. Beginning of a year, everybody's at the same age. Some schools will absolutely fight you tooth and nail. They won't let you keep the kids down. And some are very generous and they're very nice. But again, I wouldn't do that, lightly. Just, okay, child doesn't feel so, let's keep them down. I think you have to think very carefully whether you should send a kid up or down.
Do you ever recommend that though? Because I'm thinking that, yes, some parents just want to, get an advantage and have their child be the oldest in the class, but not all kids are ready for academics at 5.
Nope, they're not. But some kids do better when they go up. Sometimes I see a kid socially or perhaps struggling in the nursery and they're saying maybe we should keep the kid down. And I'm like, that kid needs to get learning right now. They need to be behind a desk. Because you keep them in this free play kind of style environment, not working for them. They need to be, they're quite smart. They need to be in a structured environment and they will do so much better once you start formal education. And sometimes it's the other way around. So to have a one size fits all doesn't work.
Right. I'm thinking of like the typical young 5-year-old boy who may not be able to sit still. You're saying here's a child who may be socially a little weak and they may say, why not keep the child back? But that's their social setting where they're not shining in their academic setting and the structure they will shine in. I'm talking about a totally different scenario. And you're right, it has to be individualized. Say a 5-year-old, typically a boy who can't sit still.
Well, boys, I would say keep down. Straight off with the boys. The boys, they should stay down.
They should wait an extra year.
Yeah,
right. I mean, we're generalizing because sometimes there are girls in the situation and there are boys that are not.
But boys are usually, when it comes to boys, right. I would sort of say keep them down. They start learning Gomorrah, and that's very hard. So if you're starting Gomorrah when your brain is just not there, why? Right.
That year can be such a gift.
It really can be. So, and then sometimes I actually will tell a parent, no, do not keep your child down, not the boys, more the girls. Your child is going to sit through nursery another year and the school are not going to be doing anything for your child in that year. So your child's actually going to waste a year. But if you put your child up and the child isn't coping, they actually might start helping you. And you might suddenly get speech therapy, occupational therapy, whatever it is you need. So unless you're going to actually help that child in that 1 year that you're keeping them down, because a year sometimes for a child, the year itself is not going to do something.
Right. It's not a magic bullet.
It is developmentally, and you just have to wait the year. But sometimes, what are you waiting for? So if we can keep the child down and then we can bring in specialist help, great. That's fabulous. They've gained a year. But if they're just going to waste their time playing in nursery and no one's going to look at them because we don't have this under 5 help like you do, and you sort of only when you get into school are the schools more official and they start looking at the children to give them some help, put the kid up, get the help.
Right. That's a really, really important point that some parents may think, oh, my child's just immature, but really they're struggling with issues that need to be addressed. Here, sometimes we have intermediate, like kindergartens, where the children can remain with their age peers, but get extra support, a smaller class. And that is a fantastic option if available. But I think we also need to talk about special educational settings. I do not know what it's like in the UK.
We don't have much. We have sort of one school. That is particularly very highly special. So if you've got a child who sort of sits on the fence, they're stuck.
So you don't have a lot of options. I mean, here, there can be pressure from the school to put your child in a special education setting. And that's a whole other conversation that we can't have because this is not happening in your world. I think I could talk about it more maybe in my talk with the pediatric neurologist.
So for you have that option. And you're having difficulties with that option. And I would say we don't have that option and we have difficulties because we don't have that option. So I wish we had sort of a halfway house where you have a school that can deal with children who've got, moderate difficulties. And our children with moderate, are sitting either in special schools, which is no good, or they're sitting in a very, fast-paced, like take a Hasidic boy sitting in a fast-paced Gemara Mishnayos at the age of 9. What's happening is these kids are getting their own school within the cheder on their own, because each cheder has got one child instead of them getting together and helping them out. And they're sitting all day. They're sort of popping back into the classroom, out the classroom. They're not getting what they need.
They're getting all one-on-one, but they're in the class only in theory, not in reality.
Yeah. But again, if you talk about money, I do very much advocate for people to join up 2 children together when they're doing therapy sometimes. It should be not so costly. And that's worked really, really well here with like a speech therapist. Instead of just doing every week one-on-one, do 1 to 2, and maybe every 3rd week do one-on-one. And that competition between the 2 children sometimes works really well. So you get a reduction on the amount you have to pay. And it works so much better for the children. And that's one way that I've managed to save quite a bit of money for children.
That is really cool. And that brings me to parents joining together for support for each other. I think that that's really important, because you can feel like you're really alone. But I want to go back for just a minute, because here it is a double-edged sword to have so many options, because just like a teacher may put pressure on a parent to put the child on medication to help them fit in, they can also be asked to leave because there's an option for them to, it can be a double-edged sword here in America with the options, because just as a teacher may pressure, or the school may pressure a parent to put their child on medication, and there may be other things going on, and the parent has to look, be realistic. On the one hand, if the child really needs it, they should be, not fighting it. They should be considering it at least. On the other hand, the parent may have to advocate, no, I need my child looked at more carefully. I need some various accommodations, modifications. The same thing is true for classroom settings. There's a basic principle here of your child is entitled to the least restrictive environment. In the public school setting, in the yeshiva setting, there may be pressure to put your child in a self-contained public school class or yeshiva class. And that can be problematic because it exists, right? So again, it's a double-edged sword. Maybe they're right. Maybe that's where your child belongs, and there is that option, and you cannot expect that child to be accommodated to the degree that the child may need. On the other hand, you may need to be advocating for your child to stay in that same placement with support. Each obviously has to be individualized.
I don't think you can do that on your own.
You can do it on your own? You
can't do that on your own. Make those decisions.
No, but I think this is where the teamwork comes in, having a conversation with the school, getting a team built up with professionals that can help you outside, whether it's an educational advocate like you, whether it's a neurologist, psychiatrist, psychologist, even the pediatrician, anybody to come in from the outside and help figure out what's going on.
Again, go back to the curious, as long as you stay with an open mind to really listen to what people are telling you. If you listen to what they're saying, you will hear. There's no point pushing your child into a school and it's just not going to work.
Right. It's really, really true. So we're really up to the end of our time. And if you want to say anything else, I could talk to you forever, by the way. This has been so much fun for me.
I think when I was reading this book about the orchid and the dandelions, he was trying to decide whether it's nature versus nurture. And at the end, he said something like, being a parent is 18 years of prayer.
Right.
Because there is no right answer. I've seen parents who have, flown all around the world trying to help their child. And the child today still can't walk and still can't talk and still can't, really do a lot of things. And I've seen, other children, and one parent told me, the doctor told him, when there's hair growing on my palm, on my hand, that's when your child will start walking and talking. And the parent said, absolutely not. Went around the world, and today the child's in Cheder and doing well. So do we know what's going to work? We really don't know what's going to work. And as a education consultant, when people ask me what's going to be, I'm not God, I don't know.
Right.
I really don't know. And you can only try and be as curious as you can to keep a good balance, and just love your child as much as you can, and just keep on praying, because what works for one might not work for a second.
Right. And keep your home a haven for that child. I love that line. That's so important.
Yeah. Your
It's
home
hard.
is what's going
Yeah,
to build the child. And
exactly.
particularly for a child that is struggling every day in school and comes back, I usually pick up a teddy bear and I pull out all the stuffing of the teddy bear. And I say, this is what your child looks like when they come home from school. And you, mother, has to put all that stuffing back in. But when they go to school tomorrow morning, they're a little fatter again.
Oh, what an image. I have to thank you so, so much for doing this with me. This has been amazing. And I think it'll help people all over the world.
I hope so. We're all the same wherever we go. One school's better, one school's worse, but we're all more or less the same.
Exactly. The details may be different, but the basics are the same. Thank you so much. And I wish you good Shabbos too.
Thank you. And to you. Great being with you.
You too.
Thanks for listening to the JOMA Preventative Health Podcast. If you've enjoyed this, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and share this with your friends. For more information, check out our Instagram at JOMA_org. Check out our website, www.joma.org, that's JOWMA.org, or email us at health@joma.org.